Clap your hands and stomp your feet. You're listening to the Clap Your Hands podcast, hosted by Eliot Shorr-Parks and Kyle Neubeck. Here they come.
Yeah, so let's get into Joel now. I left that game, and look, I'll admit my expectations maybe were just too high heading into the game, right? He wins MVP, he's coming back. Like, I was ready for a Joel game. And I wasn't there watching warm-ups, but you watch the videos and he looked relatively normal. We talked about how he looked defensively. Overall, I guess I thought he moved mostly better than I expected. He's never going to be like a sprint up and down the court guy. So maybe I'm reading too much into him, maybe, jogging relatively slowly from one end to the other. I'm sure his conditioning, understandably, with almost 2 weeks off, wasn't great. I think on defense, just watching him get up and make those blocks was encouraging just from a physical perspective. On offense, so he has 13 first half points. Which would, had the game remained close, in theory, puts him on pace for 26. But ultimately, he was a complete no-show in the third quarter offensively, like the whole team was. My overall take of him offensively was I was not impressed with him on offense. I don't think he was terrible. I don't think he was, oh my God, this is concerning. But I didn't leave that game saying, you know what? This looks like a guy that if the Sixers need him to, will put up 30 points in the three games that they're going to need to win to close this out. So curious where you fall on how you thought Joel looked on the offensive end, and I guess just overall physically.
I think when he got to it on offense, he looked fine. I think the problem, and Doc said this last night, I agreed with him on it. I think there was a little too much, hey, I'm coming back into a team that just won game one, and Joel tried to defer and like, oh, I'm going to play pass first and not try to call my own number a whole lot. Like, I think he only ended up taking 9 shots last night. Now, obviously, the minute count impacted that in some ways, but I think you could see that. Like, he was trying to feel out, hey, what am I doing here? How are we running things? How have we been running things since I've been out the last, couple weeks or so? I know most of that time was on the practice court, but just looked a little bit unsure. I also thought my biggest issue with how they set up on offense is they got back more toward the floor spots that Joel has used in the past when he struggled against Boston. There's a lot less from the elbows. It was more, I'm going to post up and I'm going to try to get to the low block. Now, some of that might have just been trying to get to the elbows and the spacing's not there or whatever, but he had a turnover on a play where Marcus Smart is on him in the post, and then Horford comes with a late double. There's a loose ball. He picks up a foul. And him with his back to the basket against this team is just not good. Like, you don't want to see that too often. It's something you can go to when you need to in desperate kind of situations. But ideally, you're getting him the ball with, let's say 15 seconds on the clock at the elbows, and he can see the whole defense facing up at the rim, and then you go from there. It's not, hey, it's down to like 8 seconds and we finally got an entry pass to Joel on the block, because at that point, Boston's going to hit him with a very aggressive double. And if he can't make a read right away, now you're down to 4 or 5 seconds, and either guy's getting it and Boston's flying on the rotation to the kick out, or he's just turning the ball over or forcing up some bad shot. Like, they need to get him the ball earlier. They need to get him the ball at his spots. But to your point, he also has to take advantage of his touches. Like, I think you saw a few flashes last night. There was one possession where he had a quick move and dunked it, just like absolutely smoked Al Horford. And that's more of what we saw the last 2 meetings of the regular season. That's good stuff. That I think is translatable as long as he's, feeling healthy. I just think there was a little too much. Yeah, I don't want to mess with what you guys have going on. And then on the other end, the other guys are obviously trying to get him the ball. He is their best player. He is the guy they're running offense through. So it's just, everybody seemed a little uncertain of themselves. And Doc said after the game, well, we've played one way the whole year, so I'm not worried about, getting back to it in game 3, game 4 at home. But it is a bit of a concern heading back to Philadelphia.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the dunk I thought was encouraging. Overall, I guess just kind of wrap up the Embiid thing. I mean, did you leave more encouraged or discouraged? Because I think that after they won game one, the optimism was around. And guess what? Joel's coming back too. And Joel came back and they got absolutely smoked. Not Joel's fault, but it is what it is. They've played the Joel card. And you touched on at the beginning of the pod, and I'll kind of back you up on it. They absolutely should have played him. This idea they shouldn't have played him to me is just silly. He got out there. I think part of his offensive struggles were rust, like flat out, like he hasn't played in a while. So now you have that out of your way. And look, he has to be better in game 3, like point blank period. He has to play better. But did you leave last night more encouraged by Joel or discouraged by the fact of how he looked?
I would say individually encouraged, because
Okay.
I thought this was going to be he can't move. The rim protection might be bad. Like you had no idea what to expect. And I thought there were a few plays he made on the move on offense as a passer that were really nice, both in terms of what he's reading and how he's moving. Like Joel driving to the basket and making like a wrap pass on the baseline to hit somebody in the corner. Because those are like, just physically, it's tough for a guy his size to try to work that footwork within the crowded paint. And so to see him on the move, making plays for others, or at least trying to make plays for others, that part of it, I think, is really good. Now, I think maybe discouraged from a team-wide perspective, because, I mean, that was rough, man. Like they clearly were not ready. They clearly were not ready to bring him back in and go back to playing this way. And it did not look anything close to the team that, round one against Brooklyn, it looked like a well-oiled machine on offense for most of that series. They're sending doubles at Joel. He's making the right reads, balls flying around the floor. There was an odd possession here and there that I thought looked good. And, one of Tobias Harris's 2 made threes out of the 6 that they had all night as a team was one of the best team possessions they've had in the playoffs, where guys are just beating a closeout, kicking to somebody, swing pass here, and then he gets a wide open corner 3. That's what they can look like at their best, but those moments are so few and far between that I don't know how you come out of that thinking, oh yeah, from a team perspective, I'm encouraged by Joel's return, even if I thought he looked pretty good individually.
Now you would hope game 3, he'll get the MVP trophy before the game. The place is going to be insane. You would hope that he's able to come out and play better. But James Harden and Tyrese Maxey. I mean, look, Harden was one of those, felt like a complete no-show. I know early on, I think had a relatively good first quarter. I think maybe had 9 points or something like that. So he did score a little early on, but didn't think he played overly well. Obviously, I don't think we're going to say anyone on the team played well. So I'm not signaling him
except
out.
For like Paul Reed, maybe.
Yeah, except for Paul Reed, who at this point, is either going to, like, he's actually a great trade chip at this point. I'm not saying I'd trade him.
Well, he's a free agent this summer, so.
But is it completely unrestricted, or is it like?
I can't remember. I feel like he might be restricted, but that's the sort of guy that I don't know that you spend a bunch of money to retain him, even if he's like, we match this deal. We'll see. That's an off-season podcast. We'll get.
I was going to say, hopefully that's not a discussion we're having anytime soon. But Maxey, he had that play where he didn't get the loose ball. It leads to a Celtics 3, which speaks to your kind of overall fair criticism of them for the effort. What'd you think of Maxey and Harden play? What'd you think of their play last night?
So Harden is in a category of his own for me. I thought he stunk after that good start to the game. Like the beginning of the game is what we talked about a lot after game 1, where you saw him attacking, you saw him trying to get downhill. He had 8 free throws in the first half.
Yeah.
And that to me is always a great sign. It wasn't a lot of like flailing around and flopping, drawing calls. It's him going into guys' chests and putting pressure on the officials. That's the James Harden that I personally love to see, that I think makes a difference for them. As the game goes on, we just see less and less of that. It's too passive. And on the defensive end, he was just fucking horrendous basically the entire night. A lot of just guy he's chasing or guy he's assigned to off ball. He's not really paying attention to. He realizes it about a second too late. Somebody's got to switch or close or do whatever late in the game. And by that point, possession's basically over. They already have a guy rising up to shoot, or somebody else has to rotate, and there's a breakdown elsewhere. It just the worst possible version of James Harden on defense, where he's standing in no man's land.
Yeah.
He's not switching when he needs to. There's no communication with a teammate to, pass off assignments. And look, I don't want to sit here and skewer him. The concern that I would have for him is that maybe that's closer to what it looks like when there's only one day between the games and he doesn't have a week and a half or whatever it ended up being to rest, recuperate, slap a friend in Vegas, get himself right mentally. And that's been the thing, right? Like last year we saw this, it was more pronounced, but we saw when James had time to get his legs under him, would look really good. When he's having to play this relentless NBA schedule, and it was, back-to-backs and things in the regular season, didn't look like the same guy. And this series, the whole way, we talked about it coming into it, every other day, all the way through a potential game 6. Game 7 is the only game that they will get any kind of real rest between the games if it gets to that point. We don't know that it's going to get to that point. The series could end in 5 or 6 games, and nobody will have ever gotten any kind of break to kind of settle themselves in and get it done. So that's my big concern with him, is that if he's not right physically, and you also have to deal with the mental struggle, or not mental struggles is probably the wrong word, the mental apathy that he shows on defense. That's a tough combination. I was a little more encouraged by Tyrese. I think some of his issues were just he missed shots from 3. Like that's going to happen.
A lot rimmed in and out too. Like a lot of them, bad.
And Harden had a couple of those too. Like Harden had 2 shots last night that there was like voodoo going on.
Yeah, they were like halfway down, if not 80%.
So game looks a little better if he makes those. But Tyrese, I thought, did a good job at least attacking inside the arc. There was some good, runners, floaters, him beating a guy off the dribble, added some pace and transition. I do think he seems like he's starting to figure out this matchup a little bit. And he can see, like, look, he's going to have a size disadvantage against most of these guys who defend him. But he has a speed advantage against absolutely everybody on that team. Nobody has the same pace as him. And so however they're playing him, if they're overplaying his right hand, he's got to go left. Like he's got to do whatever he's got to do to leverage that pace. I thought he did a much better job of that. I thought, honestly, some of their best looks from 3 came when he collapsed the defense and got into the paint and then, kicked it out to a shooter. So there's definitely some signs of life from him that I think, given this season and the career, honestly, he's had against them, I'm a little bit encouraged by, but, still only had I don't remember what the stats were. I think at one point he had like 13 points on 14 shots. So end of the day, it's still not nothing you're writing home about.
I mean, when you look at the final score, obviously you don't expect anyone to have a good stat line, but looking at the box score individually is not good. I mean, look, I think we can agree that for game 3, they need to bring whoever James Harden slapped from Vegas, just bring him into the stadium, put him on the court, let Harden have a little. I was
told that's his friend and like a personal photographer.
Perfect. Bring him. They have someone ring the bell. They can have Harden slap him at center court to get the game going. So before we